You're back. That's great because I'm so excited to have you tuning into this video, the final lesson in the first module, a module entitled Excuses and Willpower. Now you may be thinking, why in the world is this module called Excuses and Willpower when those topics haven't come up once yet in previous lessons? That's a valid question. And the answer is we've been building to a conversation about these charged topics. And I think you're going to find that my philosophy on excuses and my philosophy on willpower is quite different than what you're used to hearing in the health and fitness industry. So let's dive in.
All right. So here we are again with growth and fixed mindset. And what you probably noticed with these two ways of thinking is they interact with discomforts in very different ways. So a challenge is uncomfortable. Obstacles are uncomfortable. Criticism is uncomfortable. So the way that someone who practices a fixed mindset interprets discomfort is often very different than the way that someone, or is different than someone who's practicing a growth mindset. And so it was interesting, before we started, when we were all getting to know each other, I think 2 or 3 of you mentioned something about wanting to live a more balanced life or something along those lines. And I would be curious to know, because it relates to what we're going to discuss next, what does that mean to you? So feel free even to just to think about it, jot it down. What does living a balanced life mean to you? Is anybody willing to share?
I will. For me, it's carving out time for myself. And my TAF class that I shared earlier is an example of that. Because, a few months ago, I was trying to figure out kids' activities and, what they might want to try or sign up for. And I'm like, why am I signing them up for everything? I should sign myself up for something.
Yeah.
So I did.
I love it. I love it. So bringing balance to your life just means, when it gets out of balance, it sounds like you're giving a lot of your time and energy away to something else. And it's bringing that time and energy back to yourself. Nice. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else?
I put everything in moderation.
Okay. I think what I find really interesting about balance, to me now, there is a direct correlation between a balanced life and discomforts. And the reason for that is I believe that life becomes more balanced the sooner you notice and acknowledge your discomforts, and the more willing you are to do something about them. So put another way, discomforts in all their forms are just a way of life speaking to you about what's out of balance or what needs your attention. So obviously someone who practices a fixed mindset, well, let me just speak for myself. In the past, when I practiced a fixed mindset, that thought would make me uncomfortable. The thought of having to be in relation with my discomforts would make me uncomfortable. And I love this quote from Pema Chodron. She says, "Never underestimate our inclination to bolt when we hurt." We do that as humans, don't we? We feel the discomfort of something, and instead of investigating, instead of getting curious, we bolt. And I think that especially in our culture, it's causing a lot of issues. So we bolt because we want to feel more balanced, right? We don't want to feel the discomfort. We don't want other people to see the discomfort and the mess. But then what happens is we don't get the message of the mess. We don't get the message of the discomfort. So ironically, as we try to avoid the discomfort, we are more and more causing our life to get out of balance. Would you agree? Make sense? So let's take this. I'm going to get really just biological with you here, so stick with me. Have you guys seen this children's book, Everybody Poops? Okay. So prior to going to health coach training, I didn't think much about my digestion, and it wasn't very good. I was chronically uncomfortable, chronically noticing my digestion. But I just thought that is the way it was supposed to be. So, or not even supposed to be, I just thought that that was the way it was for humans. After going to health coach training and changing my diet, specifically, cutting down on things like dairy and gluten, increasing vegetables, increasing water, my digestion got to be a lot better. But what really stuck with me when I was going through health coach training is when one of my instructors said, you shouldn't notice your digestion. You should only notice it when you need to take care of business, take care of your business, and then it should be just a natural part of your life. You shouldn't notice it. And that really stuck with me because I was constantly noticing mine. And the reason I bring this up is because I believe that is how life should be. You shouldn't be chronically uncomfortable. These things shouldn't be coming up. Instead, what could be happening is a discomfort arises. You notice it, you do something about it, you speak to it, it speaks to you, you move on. Similar to our situation with digestion. Our body processes things without us having to have constant awareness of it unless something is off. When we feel it all the time, something is off. That's our body trying to tell us that. That's the same with life. If things keep coming up, those discomforts are trying to get your attention. It's when we live in the fixed mindset way of thinking that's hard for us to hear. When we practice the growth mindset way of thinking, suddenly it becomes like just a little bit exciting, a little bit, because suddenly we realize there's something we can do about it. It must be showing up for a reason. I love this quote from Gay Hendricks. He says, 20,000 therapy sessions during the past 30 years has taught me something I now believe in my bones. We choose how gently we get our lessons by how open we are to learning. Life teaches us with a sledgehammer if we refuse to pay attention. It administers the same lesson with a feather tickle if we show a willingness to learn. The journey of conscious living might well be called a journey from requiring sledgehammer blows to allowing ourselves to be tickled into clarity. So just take a breath on that. I want to talk about a few discomforts that are common. We're going to talk about cravings, physical symptoms, and then we're going to talk about excuses, okay? So I'm curious to know, when it comes to cravings, we'll start there. What do you think our culture promotes? Like what is the question I'm trying to form? Like, what messages are our culture giving us about cravings? I guess that's the best way to put it. Any thoughts?
That they're good.
Cravings are good?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, I think that's how the food industry sells most of the things that they do sell, is the excitement of, ooh, oh, I'm just having a craving for this, or oh, wouldn't it be good to have that? It's an emotional response instead of a physical response. Right?
Agreed.
And they're selling us that way.
Agreed. Like anything, yeah.
Well, I was thinking we also taught that we shouldn't have them. Or
Yeah.
It's the flip, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think we're also getting the flip message too.
I would agree. Yeah, when I reflected on this, what I thought was, you're good if you don't give in to them. So the culture around us is saying, give in to, we commercial after commercial, give into it, but you're good if you don't, is what the underlying message is. Another should, right, Christina? So I didn't really that was my premise of cravings until I read this book. And by premise, I mean I was good if I didn't give in to them. Then I read this book, Intuitive Eating. And we're going to talk more about this book and whatnot throughout. But in regards to cravings, they as in the authors, opened my eyes to the idea that I could befriend them. I could listen to them, that they might have a message for me. And from this particular book, what I remember taking away is they said that if you can feel a craving stemming from your neck up, that craving is usually an emotional craving. So even though you think you want a Snickers, if it feels like it's from the neck up, usually there's some sort of emotional message there. If you can feel the craving from the neck down, usually that's a biological craving. And at the time, I think I had never had never been aware of a craving from the neck down. Because after that, I was like, they're always right here, you know? But the more that I've practiced enjoying and loving vegetables, the more I know that those cravings can really happen. That when I crave vegetables, they're neck down. And so this book really opened my eyes to the fact that cravings might actually have a message for me and might deserve my attention. Now, when I went through health coach training, we talked a lot about decoding cravings. Let me restart. The founder of the health coach training I went through at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition is Joshua Rosenthal, and he has some great wisdom nuggets here on cravings that I'm going to read to you. We can and must develop dialogue with our bodies because it's talking to us all the time. And please remember, your body loves you. It does everything it can to keep you alive and functioning. You can feed it garbage, and it will take it in and digest it for you. You can deprive it of sleep, but still it gets you up and running the next morning. You can drink too much alcohol, and it will eliminate from your system. It loves you unconditionally, and it does its best to allow you to live the life you came here for. The real issue in this relationship is not whether your body loves you, but whether you love your body. I'm going to read that one more time, if I can find it here. The real issue in this relationship is not whether your body loves you, but whether you love your body. In all relationships, if one partner is loving, faithful, and supportive, it's easy for the other to take that person for granted. That's what most of us do with our bodies. It is time for you to shift this. And working to understand your cravings is one of the best places to begin. Then you can build a mutually loving relationship with your own body. Joshua also says, once we realize that the body is a reliable biocomputer that never makes mistakes, it's much easier to conclude that cravings are critical pieces of information that help you understand what your body needs. And finally, the lesson here is to look for the foods, deficits, and behaviors in your life that are the underlying causes of cravings. Many people view cravings as weaknesses, when in reality, they are important messages meant to help you maintain balance. It all comes down to trusting your body instead of thinking of your cravings as an enemy to be ignored or defeated. So, what really stuck out to me the first time I read that was looking for the underlying causes of my cravings. Like, what did that even mean, right? I thought the craving was the problem. That's what we're taught in our culture. The craving is the problem. And when I started to realize there was something behind the craving, that's when I started to reclaim a little power and freedom into what to do about it. For me, a lot of my cravings come simply if I'm dehydrated or I'm not breathing deeply. And I know that sounds really simple, but the thirst mechanism in the human body is actually very, very weak, meaning once you are thirsty, you are already dehydrated. So your body tries to give you other messages to get you to drink water. A lot of times that shows up as a subtle, uncomfortable feeling that we don't like, right? And so we'll often kind of twist that into maybe I just want a candy bar. And what I found is that simply drinking a glass of water and taking a few deep breaths can really eliminate the craving. Not so that I'm ignoring or suppressing it, but it's suddenly gone. And so it's very interesting to look at these things that are behind what you think is the problem. And that's what we're going to talk about here. I love this quote, that every symptom is a conversation. So again, if we have a physical issue, we often think it's the problem. But the physical issue is simply a conversation about the problem. And this really stuck with me when I first learned about what's called functional medicine. Are any of you familiar with functional medicine? Yeah? Anybody want to, we're going to explain it a little bit. Anybody want to express it in their own way? No? I'm going to introduce you to functional medicine via Dr. Mark Hyman, who was the instructor who introduced it to me. But before I do that, I'll just give you my kind of how I internalized it. And that's simply that in our society, we think we have thousands of problems. Someone has cancer, and someone has a cold, and someone has this disease and that disease. What functional medicine has done is has realized that those are all symptoms of greater problems, and there isn't that many problems. I think they say there's like 8 to 12 main problems, things that can go wrong with the human body, things that can get out of balance with the human body. And then you can have, people can manifest thousands of symptoms that look very different, but their underlying cause could be the same. And so if I remember right, the example he gave was like breast cancer. One woman might have breast cancer because of her stress levels that are affecting her hormones, so on and so forth. Where another woman might manifest breast cancer as a result of her diet. And so in our culture, what we do is we see the breast cancer, and then we treat that symptom. And so what we're often missing, which is why we frankly live in a very sick culture, is what's actually going on behind the scenes that's causing that symptom. And that really stuck with me in regards to health. How do we actually get healthier instead of constantly treating the symptoms? So since Mark Hyman did such a good job introducing it to me, I'm going to let him introduce it to you. Just a quick video here.
Conventional medicine looks at medicine in silos. It's good at looking very deep into specific areas, and within different segments of medicine, like cardiology or neurology or gastroenterology, they may identify causes for different problems. But as a whole, there's not systematic thinking about the fundamental laws of biology and how we work with those to see the real drivers of disease and the real drivers of chronic illness. The reality is that the body is one integrated whole system, and functional medicine breaks apart these artificial divisions that are really an artifact of medical history and helps us understand how everything works together in the body as one whole system. And the underlying phenomena that are occurring across medical specialties like inflammation or oxidative stress or toxicity or energy problems in the cells and the mitochondria, these are all fundamental ideas across medical specialties that aren't being bridged. So functional medicine is the bridge that connects the dots to the whole story of medical science. The difference between using the lens of conventional medicine and functional medicine is really in the details. Someone comes in with an inflammatory disease, let's say an autoimmune disease, like the little girl I saw who was 9 years old who had very severe autoimmune disease. Conventional approach is saying, you have an inflammatory disease, we're going to suppress the inflammation. So it shuts down, locks down, and inhibits or blocks normal physiology to try to stop the process. Functional medicine says, why is that happening in the first place? So we deal with some of the questions that are not being asked, which is not how to shut down the inflammation, but why is the inflammation there in the first place? And the approach is really changing the triggers of illness, the fundamental causes, things like toxins, infections, allergens, stress, and poor diet, all of which are the drivers of chronic disease. And there's a methodology for doing that that's very specific to functional medicine. And it's not something that is embedded within the conventional medical approach, which really focuses on symptoms and identifying the name of the disease and trying to match the drug to the name instead of going back to understanding the drivers and the cause of the disease and working with reframing how the biology works through providing the raw materials to create health and removing the impediments to health. So how does this affect how I treat the patient? How does functional medicine change the way I interact with a patient in a clinic in a real setting? And the way that's different from the way I was trained in conventional medicine is that I use a different set of tools that are based on treating the cause. So if diet is the cause of heart disease, I use diet to cure heart disease, not simply to prevent it, but to cure it or to reverse it. If diet is driving inflammation, I use diet to help reverse inflammation. For example, if someone has an autoimmune disease to gluten that shows up in their body as joint pain, I remove the gluten. If someone has a toxin that's driving their immune system or that's causing mitochondrial injury leading to brain dysfunction, I help their body remove the toxins through improving detoxification of the body. So I use the same concepts of science, but I reframe them in a way that helps me apply treatments to the cause rather than the symptom. Functional medicine is a medicine that helps you understand the cause of disease and apply the right tool at the right time for the right patient and the right dose.
I really appreciate when he said that with functional medicine you ask, why is it happening in the first place? Versus how do we suppress this thing that is happening? So I want to look through the lens of functional medicine at what, let me do one thing at a time here. So through the lens of functional medicine, how we might process something as simple as a headache. So you have a headache. What we typically do in our culture is we take medication. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. You pop an ibuprofen, the headache goes away. But if we really believe in what Dr. Mark Hyman just said, or here with every symptom is a conversation, then this label of headache being the problem and medication being the solution wouldn't be accurate. So this is what's typically happening in our culture. We're labeling this as the problem. We're labeling this as the solution. But what I'm saying is, what if there's a different label that's more accurate? So the first thing pointing to the fact that this is not an accurate label to me is the fact that the medication only provides temporary relief. Okay? I think a true solution provides sustained relief or a true transformation, a true change. So this, if it were accurately labeled, would be temporary relief. We might even call it a Band-Aid. There's nothing wrong with a Band-Aid. There's nothing wrong with temporary relief, but it is only temporary. So if we believe in what Darren is saying, every symptom is a conversation, then the headache being a symptom wouldn't be the problem. It's a symptom. I think we can all agree on that. But it would actually be a conversation starter. So what would be the actual problem behind the headache? It's going to be really individual. For some people, it might be you have a magnesium deficiency. Magnesium is a mineral that helps your blood vessels dilate. So if you have a magnesium deficiency, you might get leg cramps or sometimes headaches. It might be simply you drank too much coffee or alcohol and you're dehydrated. So you can see how the medication, although it provides temporary relief, is not taking care of this. This, to get true relief, true solution, you'd obviously need more magnesium, more water. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's then put cravings into this framework. Cravings have been inappropriately in our culture labeled problem, right? But we know now they're simply a solution. So cravings go here. What do we typically do? Kind of what you two said. You either you indulge your craving or you suppress it, right? Those are really the only options in our current culture, especially around marketing of food. So you indulge or suppress. It's giving you temporary relief to do those things, but obviously cravings come back, right? Because cravings are just conversation starters. They're not the problem. Okay, cravings are conversation starters about what is out of balance. And with problem, that's all it is, an imbalance. And solution brings you more into balance. So with cravings, like we talked about, you might be getting it because, again, you're low on water, even oxygen. So again, what would bring you into balance, what would be the true solution, has nothing to do with indulging or suppressing the craving. That's kind of irrelevant. It's more water or more breathing more deeply, or whatever the imbalance is that is happening with you. So take a little breath on that. Does that all make sense? Because we're going to shift now here to something that's really important. If this is all logical to you, then let's talk about a different discomfort. We started this whole conversation talking about how we interact with discomforts, right? Cravings, obstacles, challenges. A different discomfort, similar to a physical discomfort or cravings, would be the obstacles in your life, excuses. That's what our culture labels obstacles, excuses. Okay? Now, what our culture would say is that your excuses, when it comes to exercise, is the problem, correct? And the solution is motivation. The solution is more accountability. The solution is more willpower. Agreed? But can you see how that if accountability and discipline and more willpower only provide temporary relief, it's not a real solution? And then your excuses aren't the real problem. Okay? So we're going to put excuses not in this column, but where they properly belong. Excuses. There we go. Sound it out. And we're also going to put willpower, motivation, accountability, discipline here. This is where they properly belong. Okay? They are temporary relief. They are a Band-Aid. They are not a solution. They do not bring more balance to your life. So let's just put willpower to here to embody all those. And to bring the point home, I'll tell you about a study that was done on children. It was on willpower. The study was on willpower. And it was done on children taking a test. And the first group of children they had sit in a waiting room, nothing was there, took them in to take the test. The second group of children, the only thing that changed was they put cake or candy or something on the table, and they said, don't eat that. And then they took the same test. And the second group performed significantly lower than the first group. And the conclusion that was that they came to with that study is that willpower is an extremely limited resource as humans, extremely limited. And it, when we're trying to fuel our life on it, this is me speaking now, not the study, but you can see how if it is limited and you're trying to fuel your life on it, it's an unwise choice. Just like the kids, they were using up all their willpower and had very little to focus on the test, and that had significant results tangible results on the outcome. So take a breath on all that. Before I move forward, well, actually, I'm going to finish this up here, and then we'll chat. Okay. So, headaches, cravings, excuses, all in the same category, all discomforts, all conversation starters, all symptoms, but none of these are problems. None of these are problems. Medications, indulgences, and suppressions, willpower, accountability, motivation, discipline, nothing is wrong with any of those things. But if we're going to label them accurately, they can only be labeled as temporary relief or a Band-Aid. Okay? So the question becomes, what goes here? If excuses are not the problem, what is? And that's what the whole rest of the course is about. But one thing I really do keep watching. One thing I really do want to drive home, actually there's two things before we discuss all this. And one is that you can see when you work in this realm, what you're perpetuating is a vicious cycle. Okay? It happens with cravings, it happens with everything, right? These things, the second thing I want to drive home is these things are going to come up no matter what. Okay? They should be labeled not only as a conversation starter or a symptom, but they should also be labeled as natural, always going to happen, everybody has them. There's nothing more natural than this column. Okay? What gets out of balance, what's happening in our culture, is the way we deal with it is unnatural. Okay? Which is why we have these vicious cycles that lead to extreme imbalances. These are often indicators of little imbalances that you can take care of. They're tickle feathers. When we don't use them appropriately, then what's really going on here continues to escalate, leading to bigger conversation starters, if you want to label it that way. But nothing is more normal than this. Once again, the only thing that's abnormal that we do in our culture is this vicious cycle. So a true 180 in this particular diagram would be from an imbalance to a balance. An actual problem to an actual solution. So take a breath, ladies. Take out your pen and journal and write down, once again, your top 1 to 2 insights. And one thing I would also ask yourself is, does this resonate or not? Does it make sense or not?
Well, maybe I'm totally botching what you were saying, but this, I'll just start with this is how kind of I took it. How, if something is not comfortable, then something is not right with you.
Yeah.
And, which that part I totally agreed with. But then I started thinking, well, what about this situation? What about this situation? Like, with the cravings thing, okay, personally, I crave dark chocolate when it's that time of the month, right? No,
That's
that
a
is
good thing.
below the neck.
Yeah. That wouldn't be an indulgence. That would be.
That's what you need during that time.
Responding
That wouldn't
to
be an
the craving.
indulgence. Yeah. That would be a true imbalance to balance then.
There we
Exactly.
go.
Yep.
And it usually does make me feel better.
Exactly.
There we go. I love it.
So I think that makes a lot of sense in in general, I'll say. But I can think of exceptions a lot of it that aren't necessarily, not that should dominate the thinking of this, but, and then like cancer, like I don't really follow it in the situation of certain things,
Okay.
like high blood pressure. Yes, there's an underlying thing. You don't just need to throw medication at it necessarily.
Right.
There's other things causing that, So I guess yes and no, I agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. So one thing I do want to say is, once again, I don't think there's anything wrong with the temporary relief column. You know what I mean? I think medications can serve an amazing purpose. I think it's just if they're not solving the underlying problem, that's when there's an issue. So in regards to cancer, would you say that you believe that do you believe that lifestyle choices might affect whether someone gets cancer or not?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I guess it just depends. Like I said, I don't think there's one nice little way to pull it together necessarily.
Okay.
I think there's always some exceptions.
Okay.
But just to piggyback, to play devil's advocate, whatever you want to call it, to continue that thought, you said an example was high blood pressure, but if you have certain genetic makeup, you can have high blood pressure, and it has nothing to do with your lifestyle or diet or anything like that. And I think what I find really frustrating is that I feel like our culture is always at extremes. And working in corporate America, I feel like I'm constantly surrounded by either what we call like tree huggers or health nuts, where it's like, work out, gluten-free, dairy-free, no meat, vegan, da-da-da. Or it's like, there's cake in the break room. Like every day. And it's
dope.
but it never feels like there's no in the middle anymore. Like it feels like there's no life of moderation. You either are like gluten-free and you give your kids healthy snacks and you do your exercise and you drink water all day, or you're a slob. And the same thing with medicine, because my wife has a lot of health issues. My mother has a lot of health issues. Physically, they are completely different. They have completely different backgrounds, and they both have to use a lot of different types of medication, but they also have to watch their diets and they also have to exercise. And it's frustrating because I would say 90% of my colleagues are, medicine is bad, don't take medicine. But they don't live with someone who suffers from chronic nausea and chronic pain. And yes, we're trying to find the problems, and that's what's frustrating, is that traditional medicine has not helped us find the problem.
Right.
We just keep saying, here's a symptom, and how do we get at that? So I was thinking about, because I went into the cafeteria here, I am a firm believer that your relationship with food and how your body handles food is 55% what you eat and 45% your relationship to that food. And so you talked about like digestion. If you have something that's really good for you, but you're eating it when you're highly stressed or you're sick or you're whatever, your body's not going to digest it properly. So when I looked into like diet and health and all of that, I get mixed messages. I get one message that says, popcorn is great, do popcorn. And I love popcorn. We love popcorn in my family. I get another message that says, popcorn is one of those fake pretend health foods. It's not really good for you. It's really full of saturated fats and everything else. And I'm like, okay.
I know. That's our culture. It's
Yeah.
complete confusion.
And, you know, and I feel like every 10, 15 years, everything cycles around. It was like, have milk, drink milk with vitamin D, milk is good for you. Milk is horrible. No other animals drink milk. Don't drink milk. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like I feel like I'm constantly having to say either I'm being a good person or a bad person. And I like the concept of saying, okay, all food is not good or bad. It has a nutritional value. Some of it has a much higher nutritional value, and some of it has a very low nutritional value. And I think that goes along with the things you're saying of like, are you in that growth mindset of saying, okay, I have two options. Is this option more nutritious for me than saying, well, that's bad, and if you indulge that, you're a bad person, or if you don't indulge that, you're a good person.
I know. You've done a very good job of describing
Sorry.
our culture. No, you have. This is
So
this.
frustrating.
I think it is. It's
Yeah,
frustrating.
And then if you can't be perfect, then why try?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, you know.
Right.
You don't want to be the health nut anyway. Like,
Right. Because I'm fun and
You're either fun or healthy. Yeah. It's a weird. We've done a weird thing to health in our culture. We really have. We have. And I appreciated what you said, like your perspective, and I think this concept that we talked about, even if there is exceptions, if you, like you were saying, if you think of it in a general way, it still can be impactful in regards to how you're moving forward. And what I would say is, with it, instead of like trying to think of, well, does that situation fit into, or does that, or with that person, I think it's more helpful if it's just as the discomforts come up in your own life, in your own body, you just ask, is there a message here?
Right.
And then it kind of takes you off that tangent of, is this a religion I could follow? Do you know what I mean? Versus just like, could I get a message here?
Yeah. Well, I think like your headache example is totally clear. Like, and I know one of your videos talked about that too, because you suggested using a ball on the back of your neck when you had a headache, and that you drink a glass of water and do that. Totally works.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
I know.
I had the only ball I could find one day was a baseball. It was even signed or something. I don't know. Jason's like, what the heck are you doing? I don't know. Alicia said to do it.
It's funny because health is pretty simple. Like you can use a baseball or a fancy fitness thing. You can drink black water or regular water, but it's gonna it's gonna help with the headache. I love that example. What else, ladies?
Can I share again?
Yes.
My insight was around, you said something about how we shouldn't be chronically uncomfortable. You shouldn't be chronically uncomfortable. And then I wrote, you shouldn't have to really think about exercise and nutrition. It can just be a natural part of your life. And for me, that was just huge. And I wish I could remember what you actually said that like caused that insight for me. But that was a huge shift.
I love that. I love that.
I can do that.
Because we really do think of it as the thing to check off your to-do list versus a part of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting when you said we shouldn't be chronically uncomfortable. It's funny because in the discomfort column I put natural.
Yes.
But I think the difference is I don't think our discomforts are intended to be chronic. I think they're intended to be acute, get our attention, get the message, move forward.
Right.
What else?
I guess something that resonated for me was when you talked about discomfort and how it makes us bolt and run away from it, and how we oftentimes miss the message of the mess. Because I feel like a lot of times, like, that is the easiest thing to do, is to just not acknowledge it. But when you put it in the columns and you made it seem like, oh, it's natural and those are supposed to happen and you're supposed to just acknowledge it, it's like, oh, that makes more sense. But now, how am I going to apply that in my real life? Because then I see that in other people. I see that, like I said, in my own life, that that just running away from it is so much. It's the fight or flight thing, I guess, too, maybe a little bit in there. That when we have discomforts, we just ignore them or pretend they're not there, and then they keep popping up until you deal with them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And again, it goes back to fixed versus growth mindset.
Yeah.
If you think they shouldn't be there,
Right.
then you're going to do whatever you can to get rid of them or ignore them. But when you realize, oh,
They're supposed to be there.
discomfort is a part of growth,
Right.
you can reframe them. Anything else?
Well, and I did get a little teary-eyed when you were reading the quote about the loving your body, and your body loves you, and you need to love it back. Because that's really powerful. Like, I guess I've never, thought of being in a relationship with your body in that way, other than like my shoulds, like I should do this and should do that. But like when you think of it as more just like, they're doing all these nice things for you, and you treat it so crappy, you should be nice back to it once in a while. I guess I've never like framed it in that way, so it was kind of
Didn't he do a beautiful job?
Yeah, right.
It's just
to,
like
hear it that
it's
way.
constantly there,
Yeah.
doing whatever it needs to do for
Right,
us.
keeping you
We're
alive.
the one that is like dancing around the,
Right.
I'm bad, I'm good, I hate it, I love you, and it's just there doing its thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to, when we go through the modules, I think what is difficult sometimes is that always makes sense, and it will make sense to us, it will make sense if we see it on the video, but making sense when we're specifically talking about it and then recognizing it in the moment of everyday life, I think is something you have to like work on or be cognizant of. Are we going to talk about like how just in everyday life you're going about your day and it's like, oh, I feel whatever, and it's like, because I know for me, I had to learn how to recognize headaches and when I was getting them before they got to the level of a migraine, and I noticed that the majority of the time when I got them, it was because I hadn't eaten or I wasn't breathing properly or dehydrated.
Take a deep breath.
Exactly. But the only reason I can do that now is because I was taught to do that and like to recognize it. And so I think this makes total sense. But then how do I say like, oh, this is an excuse, this is a symptom that I'm having, help me recognize, okay, well, what's the real problem here, what's going on?
Well, I think you kind of answered your question when you said that it takes practice and awareness. You have to develop the practice and awareness. So are you going to come out of here and have the awareness up to here? No. You'll come out of here with 3 days of awareness.
Yeah.
That's how it works,
I have a PhD in this now.
Yeah. But I think the difference is when you start to talk about functional things, how things are actually working. You know what I mean? Like, so you're not stuck on the center thing. Then when you practice those throughout your days, weeks, months, suddenly you make big leaps because you're not perpetuating dysfunction. So I think the goal of this course, are we going to talk about different tips and stuff? Yes, absolutely. But the main goal is let's have a different conversation. And then once we have that different conversation, your awareness will completely shift. You'll practice that awareness a year from now. Who knows who and where and what you'll be.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Good for now? Okay. Let's take a deep breath after all that.
Kudos to you. You're not only done with lesson 3, but with module 1 as a whole. You know, the simple fact that you've gotten this far with these videos is definitely a sign that you're not only ready, but willing and totally capable of making and sustaining the positive changes you're craving in your life right now. It's exciting. Well done. Okay, let's see. To wrap up module 1, I would encourage you to take a second to jot down your top insights and takeaways if you haven't already. You may also be interested in checking out the PDFs that correspond with the content from this module. These PDFs contain things like quotes and lists of books and other resources that I referenced throughout the last 3 videos. Then, when you're ready, I can't wait to see you in the next video, Module 2, Lesson 1. The question, what's the real problem behind all your excuses, will be answered once and for all. And I'll also be introducing you to the 4 quadrants of life, which is not only a basis for all the modules moving forward, but is also a basis for understanding yourself and understanding others in a whole new way. I think you'll find it eye-opening, to say the least. So with that said, see you over there. Module 2, Lesson 1.